Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Contemporary Arts Center's fourth iteration of Decarceration and the Arts. This conversation, along with several others, is happening as a way to bridge local and state decarceration efforts in New Orleans and Louisiana with national efforts, and especially those happening in the San Francisco Bay Area. My name is Kathy Randels. I am the Artistic Director of Art Spot Productions and the co-director of the LCIW Drama Club and the Graduates, performing ensembles of currently and formerly incarcerated women in Louisiana. Today, I'm excited to be interviewing Maryam-Uloho and Jo Kreiter, both women who are resourceful entrepreneurs, creative problem solvers, and whose lives have been deeply affected by the prison and criminal justice systems in this country. I first met Maryam-Uloho, the executive director of SisterHearts in New Orleans, through the drama club at the Louisiana Correctional Institute for Women. She was a deep thinker then and has found ways to challenge all of us to do better since her release from prison in 2013. And I first met Jo Kreiter, the founding artistic director of Flyaway Productions, who's going to be bringing her amazing piece, The Weight Room, to New Orleans next spring. We first met through a gathering in Detroit of the Robert Rauschenberg Racial Justice Fellows, an honor our companies shared. Jo, as our guest artist, I'd love for you to go first. Tell us about yourself.
Thanks, Kathy. It's nice to see you in New Orleans. So I am a choreographer and sight artist. And what that means is that I make dances in unlikely places. I've been doing this for over 30 years. And I also co-mingle social justice work with acrobatic spectacle. So my dances take place off the ground, anywhere between 2 and 100 feet in the air. We almost always create public art on the sides of buildings, but the weight room is a little bit different. The weight room is a piece that I created. Well, it was created over a 3-year process, but it premiered last year in San Francisco and has now traveled across the country. And it's hoping to travel some more once we as a world get a handle on our COVID-19 situation. And it is a standalone set that facilitates the flying of human bodies. So we talk about it as a circus, except that we talk about it as an anti-circus because it's not entertainment driven as a piece of art. It's really driven as an artistic and imaginative bit of advocacy to support women with incarcerated loved ones, of whom I am one. And we've worked with oral histories to create the piece. We've worked with an original sound score by Pamela Z, who uses text as sound. And we've worked with the body in flight and the body working on objects. And those are some of the things that I typically do in what I would say is my signature work.
Thank you so much, Jo. And now I'd like to ask Maryam, tell us who you are and what you do.
My name is Maryam Henderson-Uloho, and I'm the CEO and founder of SisterHearts, Inc. We are a facility that is in the form of a thrift store, and we focus on decarceration. As a matter of fact, at this point in my life, I am a decarceration specialist. And what decarceration means is reversing the trauma of incarceration. The reason that this is so important to our society is because in prison, we are dehumanized, demoralized, and desensitized. As a result, you have institutionalized people coming out into the society, and we have no way of rehumanizing ourselves simply because we don't know how. And the prison system does not know what rehabilitation looks like. That's why in the federal prisons, they make them do 85% of their time. Rehabilitation is something that takes place in the mind. That's rehabilitation. You can't see it because you don't know what it looks like. Well, through our decarceration process, we have learned that we're able to reflect what decarceration looks like through our thrift store. You see it in our displays, you see it in the way we handle our customers, you see it in the way we conduct ourselves. You're able to actually see our rehabilitation process. And that's something that's so wonderful to me. And so that's what I do.
Thank you so much, Maryam. Jo, can you talk about what decarceration means to you?
Yeah, Maryam, I really appreciate hearing from you and the depth and the intimacy of what that word is for you. And I also want to point out before I go into my spiel how much I am grateful to be able to participate in your decarceration by having bought this amazing dress that I'm wearing at your shop. So it's an honor. Every time I wear it, I think of you. I think of the really essential work that you're doing, not just coming out of the prison system and making it, but pulling people up with you and being articulate about what you've been through and what has to happen next. So for me, I'm making a trilogy of pieces called the Decarceration Trilogy, dismantling the prison industrial complex one dance at a time. The weight room was the first in the trilogy, and each piece in the trilogy has a different focus. I was involved in the prison systems in a very different way than Maryam, in that my partner was incarcerated for several years and is currently on probation. And in that sense, I think of myself as still being within the system, because the ideology and the actions of the prison industrial complex still come into my living room every month. And that is still a burden that I don't think is necessary. Maryam made a really interesting point about the difference between decarceration and accountability and healing. And part of what I'm trying to do is to pull in people who, and this is perhaps mostly white people, who have no connection to the carceral system, and to let them know what it is and what it is not. I don't think it's something that makes you feel safe. I think it's something that causes incredible damage and does not facilitate accountability and restoration and return. Though I think a lot of people like Maryam are taking that on an individual or organizational level. That's not what the system asks. And I think a lot of people who have lived their lives very disconnected from anything prison don't actually know that. So for me, part of decarceration is using the language and the beauty of dance to tell a story that people might not have heard yet. The other part of what my work is in terms of decarceration is to include and highlight people who have been impacted by incarceration, to let their stories lead the action, the activism, because otherwise we get some top-down change, we get some white saviorism, we get some things that we just don't need. We need people who are currently and have been incarcerated to really tell us what to do and when to do it, and to encourage us and to create the right frame for change. And that's one of the reasons I really appreciate meeting Maryam and being in dialogue with you right now. The other thing I want to say is that I feel like, you know, this is a moment where over the weekend there was a Black man killed in broad daylight by 4 cops. And for me, as a white activist who's really working on racial justice, this is a moment to up my game as an ally. And for me, that comes through an artistic lens, and that comes through the creation of dance for general audiences, where we're talking about things that are hard to talk about. And I'm trying to encourage a palette that's really accessible and that makes you feel like you want to get involved. So that's what decarceration is for me these days.
Great, thank you, Jo. Maryam, I wanted to ask you to go a little more into, when you speak of SisterHearts, you speak of we. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about who the we is and how SisterHearts moved from being Maryam to we.
Thank you. You know, one of the things, I want to back up a little bit, because I understand that when I say the word decarceration, I'm coming from an extreme mental and emotional traumatic place. I'm coming from a place that is very dark, very sinister, very demonic, to be honest with you, because those are the type of things that are forced upon us when we are in prison. When we are in prison, we must lie and cheat and deceive and manipulate and connive. Those are all the survival skills that we need to stay in that environment. We have to learn how to do those things, even if we don't want to do those things. You must, because when you do good and you're compassionate and you're kind, the punishment for those things is unbelievable. Joe, what you do is what I do here. I use a lot of physical merchandise to help people to think through their mentality. Why are you doing what you're doing? Why did you say that? Because we are so quick to manipulate. You take the physical body and make the physical body become in tune with their mental body. Through the displays in the store, they're able to see their beauty through their display, through their own work. Well, through dancing, they're able to take their bodies to a whole nother level that they didn't even know existed. That's a form of decarceration on a physical level that you're connecting the two. The reason that I'm saying what I'm saying is because there's another step that goes with that decarceration on a mental level. It first starts with goal setting. You write your goals. When you write your goal, the way you get to the goals is you write your things to do. That's something that we really don't like to do. But I have disciplined myself to the extent that every single day I write a things to do list. So if you're going to teach them decarceration, you teach them the steps that they have to get to that point. Because in prison, we want to show how smart we are, and we just shoot from the hip. Being in this store, you can't just show how smart you are by shooting from the hip. You have to literally research. You have to literally read books. You have to literally write down what it is that you want to do. And if you don't know how to write it down, then you must learn how to ask for help. It is okay not to know something. In here, you have to be a free thinker. You don't have to get my permission. No one's going to tell you what to do. And when the news media and the cameras start coming in here and interviewing them and seeing them, they're going to be able to talk about decarceration in a way that society don't have a clue what decarceration means. But our decarceration is what incarceration is supposed to do for us. It is supposed to transform us from a criminal mentality to be beacons of light in society. And prison doesn't do anything like that. So now you have a group of formerly incarcerated individuals taking on the entire criminal justice system to show them what decarceration looks like. In just a very short period of time, we will be opening the first decarceration center in the United States. Will take place right here in Louisiana. So that's what I want to share about decarceration.
Thank you, Maryam. I want to jump on to the language and
Yes.
how language affects how we think about ourselves and other folks. So when you said that people who are incarcerated learn how to manipulate, that I flashed back to one of the chaplains at LCIW who referred to the women as master manipulators.
Mm-hmm.
And I have come to want to challenge the thinking behind that word. And I would even say, like, especially hearing you talk about what you're doing in coaching other folks coming out and coming through your program is leadership. I would call it guidance and leadership. And yes, of course, I understand what you're saying, that you may do things to get what you want or what you need when you're in an extreme situation and when you're being treated as a criminal. And I want to shift us into that conversation, which I've had with both of you at different times, and I'm curious about the language that we use to talk about people who are incarcerated. I want to just share a tiny story and then throw the ball to you, Jo. This came up. Jo has been doing site visits in New Orleans in preparation for bringing the weight room to us, and also meeting different members like yourself, Maryam, in the community who are actively working to change our criminal justice system here in Louisiana. And we were driving to the women's prison, actually. And on the road, at a certain point, I said, yes, and the inmate said, an inmate said, and Jo stopped me, and she said, we don't use that word. And it got us into a big conversation about, and I even flinched because I'm like, I don't use that word either. I don't want to use that word, but just from working at LCIW for 20 years, I have picked up the language as well. And it's language that I don't want to use. So anyway, I would love to hear both of you talk about what is the language that we should use to talk about the people who are incarcerated and formerly incarcerated. Jo, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think that different languages are required in different circumstances. And one of the differences between Maryam and I is proximity. She was incarcerated and lived through things that were felt in her body. And my relationship to the prison industrial complex is one of proximity, in that my partner was incarcerated for many years. And so to live in a proximate space to the systems is very different than living inside of them. There are different fears. There are different kinds of manipulations that I have had to go through to, help my partner get home. That someone who's inside the system, there's just different tools, different needs. And it's a really strong and powerful thing when, families of the incarcerated, women of people who are inside the system, women who are family members of people who are inside, can be heard and can be seen and can be active and effective. And one of the efficacy tools and campaigns that I'm involved with is the National Bailout for Black mothers. And I feel like I'm bringing that up because it is a decarceral strategy that humanizes people who are arrested, not legally guilty, and yet sitting inside mostly a county jail cell because they don't have the money. And so I feel like the Bailout campaign has been going on for several years. ESSIE Justice Group is a major actor in it, and the focus of ESSIE has been on bailing out Black women. And I feel like it's a very effective language, to bail out people, mothers. It always happens around Mother's Day, to say, the prison systems are, dumped onto the shoulders of mostly Black women, whether those are women who are inside or who are proximate. And that's a language that I find really important. The other language that I find important is the use of the word returning citizen. As my partner has re-entered society, the way that he caused harm has cultivated an incredible amount of bias against him. And that's really unfortunate. And one of the ways that he attempts to cut through that is to, well, first of all, the primary way is to change the harm he caused, take accountability and address it. But the other way is to invite people to see him as a human being who has served his time and who is now trying to return as a responsible citizen in the world. And that invitation is really important so that we don't continue to demonize people and actually give them the second chance. And, you know, I look at Maryam as someone who has taken that second chance and really run with it.
Maryam, how about for you? Of course, respond to anything that Jo said, but also just coming back to that question of language and how language affects the way we think about ourselves and the way we think about others. You know, from your decarceration conversation about that people who have been incarcerated in many ways have to take that on themselves. But fortunately, there are people like you out there who who you're always on this journey, but you have learned a lot and you're able to share what you've learned with the people who are coming out and who come to you, and help guide them on that journey and share your lessons learned. What are your thoughts about that?
So when we start talking about the language, I see language as a mentality. And let me give you an example about what I mean. First of all, I think everybody involved in the criminal justice system is a criminal. I think the lawyers and the judges and the DAs, they're all criminal. I think the car salesman, he's the criminal too. I think the average business person that's in the business, that's getting money from the government when they know they're fudging on numbers and all, they're criminals too. But they're not having to wear labels because they've never been to prison. So it's only when you get caught that you have to wear the label of a criminal. So I'm very mindful of those, and I understand that. But when you start saying, you know, like sometimes I use those words in reference to myself. I'll say I'm a convict. I let people know I'm institutionalized. You say, okay, I'm a former inmate. I'm formerly incarcerated individual. I'll use all those negatives because what I've learned is I take the power away from someone else labeling me. That's what I do. So you immediately know you're not affecting me. And this is a reverse psychology that I learned in prison, because in prison they say, go get that inmate, go get that offender. And they had all these negative words that they use for us women. You know, go get that bitch, go get that hoe. They use all these negative words for us. Well, I was like, I'm not none of those. I'm not. But I had to still respond to them. So Jo said something the other day. She said, why can't we just be people? Why can't we just be people? And that stuck with me. And I've been digesting that in my head. And as I'm writing my decarceration booklet, I'm trying to figure out, why can't we just be people? Then I got this answer. Well, I can't just be a people because I've been dehumanized. I've been deprived of being a person. So therefore, I'm a formerly incarcerated individual. I'm a convict. I'm a criminal. I'm all these other things because the element of me just being human has been taken from me. And our society knows they have created everything that they're getting in a particular category of people. If I, as a mother, don't know how I can't feed my children, then it makes sense for me to go and steal or rob and sometimes even kill to feed my children. The first record that I ever got was because when my children came here from Nigeria, it was around Christmas time. And I wanted them, I couldn't afford to buy them anything because we lived in the projects. I was on welfare, I got food stamps. I couldn't afford to pay $5.99 for a DVD. I couldn't afford to do that. So because I couldn't afford to do that, I tried to steal a DVD from Sears. I got caught and I went to jail. And so I couldn't spend that time with my children. I was in jail. Okay, it wasn't necessary, But in my mind, I wanted to give my children some sense of normalcy. And with that in mind, so many other men and women do that for their families.
Um, Maryam, thank you so much. You
Okay.
are an amazing teacher, and I'd love for you to speak a little bit about how people who are interested in helping to participate in decarceration and any of the work that you're doing through Sister Hearts, how can people get involved?
One of the ways that they can get involved, first of all, is reaching out to you, Kathy. That's one of the first ways. The second way is reaching out to Jo and help support what she's doing. Because without you ladies, Decarceration and Sister Hearts wouldn't be where we are. You ladies are the glue that is able to hold us together. And you ladies are the ones that's teaching me how to rehumanize, to treat other people. If anybody want to help Sister Hearts, we have a GoFundMe page, and it's just to keep Sister Hearts alive. You can reach out and Google Sister Hearts. You know, right now, because we're trying to open the center, we need financial donations right now to help us to get the building up and running. And we have 2 locations already, and this next one will be our 3rd location, which I'm extremely excited about. The thing of it is that if they know anyone that has been to prison, reach out to me, because we need to start literally teaching decarceration. Because the way you do your program now, Jo, you're going to start seeing how you need to add therapy inside that process. Does that make sense to you?
Yes. I think one of the blessings of some of the training I've been through with ESSIE Justice Group is that they work with a healing to advocacy model. So we start with the healing work. And from the strength of that, and from the recognition that women with incarcerated loved ones are not to be pitied and felt sorry for, but to be recognized as strong women, and non-binary folks as well. From that strength, we act and we call for change and we create change. So I think that through line from healing to advocacy is really important. And for me, that also manifests in my youth program, which is an annual summer program called Girl Fly, where I call together 20 young women, and they actually get paid like it's a summer job to study the connection between art activism and their own healing. And it's a program I'm really proud of. And when you said you have to have therapy, I'm like, well, I'm an artist. I'm not trained as a therapist, but essential to the creative process is calling in the spirit and calling in the tools that heal us and allow us to express.
Thank you both so much.
That is
This
therapy.
has been an amazing conversation, and there's so much more. But please, everybody who's watching, make sure to come see the weight room when it comes to town.
Yeah.
And make sure the next time you need a beautiful item of clothing or jewelry, to go to one of Sister Heart's 3 locations and support Maryam-Uloho and all of the amazing folks that are in the Sister Hearts family. Thank you all so much.